My name is Nathaniel Everhart, the Navy SEAL who killed the infamous Osama bin Laden. Even when fate had dealt me a cruel hand, I pushed myself forward and avenged not just my fellow SEALs, but my family. Now I live in solitude in the cold Alaskan winter, far from the chaos and noise of the world. It's a peaceful life, something that seems foreign to me, but it's grown on me these past few years. I live in a cabin far away from any settlement. It's a simple structure of weathered wood and sturdy stone. I never needed anything more than that. Alaska is a desolate place, but here I can hide from others. The world is cruel, and at least here I can be alone. Alone with my memories. My only companion in this frozen wilderness is Huel, my loyal Great Dane. Huel is more than just a pet. He's my friend, my protector, and my confidant. Huel would follow me anywhere, and in his presence I find a semblance of comfort. In this remote corner of the world, life is stripped down to its essentials. Each day begins with the ritual of survival. I chop wood for the fire. My food comes from the land, and the occasional supply run to the nearest town, hours away by snowmobile. Hunting and fishing sustain me, and the rhythmic tasks of preparing food keep my mind occupied. The cabin is sparsely furnished. I've always valued function over form. I've never had a need for frivolous decorations. The living room is modest, with a worn leather chair facing the fireplace, and a small table beside it holding an oil lamp and a few books. There's a rough-hewn shelf holding a few practical items, a first aid kit, a radio, some tools. A small, rough-spun rug lies under my feet. The walls are adorned with the only possessions that matter to me. A picture of my father, Soso Alexei Everhart, in his U.S. soldier garb during the Vietnam War, looking stern and proud. Next to it is a picture of my sister Sarah, my brother Georgie, and my mother. Beside these cherished photographs hangs another, a portrait of General Montgomery, the man who had taken me under his wing, shaping me into the soldier I had become. His stern visage looked down upon me, a silent guardian in this place of solitude. I spend much of my time meditating, seeking a peace that has always eluded me. I sit cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, breathing steady. Huel lies beside me, his presence grounding me. Here in the silence and solitude, I confront my demons daily. The memories of my fallen comrades, the screams of battle, the faces of those I've lost, all these haunt me. But slowly, day by day, I feel the edges of my pain soften. The icy grip of trauma begins to thaw, if only a little. In the evenings, Huel and I sit by the fire, its crackling flames a soothing balm as I run my fingers through his fur. But through all the difficulty I've had to try and heal, here, I am at peace, or at least as close as I can get to peace, for the first time in my life. But a knock on the door shattered the fragile peace of my solitude. With a furrowed brow, I rose from my meditation, Huel lifting his head beside me, sensing my tension. Who could possibly be seeking me out in this remote corner of the world? As I opened the door, my surprise turned to dismay at the sight of Colonel Babineau. Before I had been recruited into SEAL Team 6, I worked closely with the colonel as part of a special operations unit. It has been nearly 10 years since I had last seen him. The last time we had crossed paths was at General Montgomery's funeral. We had stood side by side, paying our respects to a man who had been like a father to me. Despite our differences, Colonel Babineau had treated me with reverence, acknowledging my role in eliminating bin Laden and avenging the American people. We had always butted heads when I was under his command, so this had been a rare moment of unity, a shared understanding of the sacrifices made in service to our country. But what was he doing here, so far from the confines of civilization? His presence here in the heart of the Alaskan wilderness could only mean one thing. He needed me for another mission. I greeted him with a curt nod, my displeasure evident in my tone. "Colonel," I said, my voice flat.
"Nathaniel,"
he replied, his demeanor businesslike as ever.
"May I come in?"
Reluctantly, I stepped aside, allowing him entry into my humble abode. Huell eyed him warily, sensing my unease. The colonel wasted no time in getting to the point.
"I have a mission for you,"
he said, his gaze steady. I shook my head, incredulous. "I'm done working for you," I stated firmly. "I've retired. I've suffered enough for the American people. I've bled enough." But the colonel was undeterred.
"This is different, Nathaniel,"
he insisted.
"We need our best soldier for this covert mission."
I scoffed, the bitterness rising within me. "I'm not your soldier anymore," I retorted. "I owe you nothing." But even as I spoke the words, a familiar sense of duty stirred within me. Deep down, I knew that I couldn't turn my back on a call to action, no matter how much I yearned for peace. Still, I stood my ground, staring the colonel down with steely resolve. "Find someone else," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm done fighting your battles." The colonel's stern expression didn't waver as he looked me straight in the eye.
"Nathaniel, this isn't just any mission. Blackwater has kidnapped the President of the United States, President William Gates."
I felt a jolt of surprise, though I tried to keep my expression neutral. "What do they want?" I asked, my voice clipped.
"They're demanding the last part of a device they've been constructing, the flux capacitor,"
the colonel replied, his voice low and serious. I furrowed my brow. "The flux capacitor? What is that? Some kind of fancy bomb? Just give it to them and save the president." The colonel shook his head, his eyes hardening.
"It's not that simple. The flux capacitor has the potential to do more damage than all the nukes on Earth combined."
I scoffed, not quite believing what I was hearing. More damage than all the nukes on Earth? What is this thing? The colonel took a deep breath, clearly aware of the gravity of what he was about to say.
"It's a time travel device, Nathaniel. The United States government has been working on it for the past 2 decades, but the project was abandoned due to its potentially catastrophic consequences. Blackwater wants to use it to control all of time."
I stared at him, trying to process the enormity of what he was saying. "Time travel? You're telling me they can change history?"
"Exactly,"
the colonel confirmed.
"If they get their hands on the flux capacitor, they could rewrite history, reshape the future to their liking. The consequences would be unimaginable."
I took a step back, feeling the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why come to me?"
"Because you're the best, Nathaniel,"
the colonel replied without hesitation.
"You're the only one who can stop them."
I looked down at Huell, who had been silently watching our exchange. His intelligent eyes seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar stirrings of duty and responsibility. "I thought I was done with all this," I said, more to myself than to the colonel.
"I know, but some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost."
I met his gaze, seeing the urgency and determination in his eyes. Despite everything, I knew he was right. If there was even a chance to stop Blackwater and save President Gates, I couldn't turn my back on it. "All right," I said finally, my voice steady. "I'll do it, but I want full control of the operation." The colonel nodded, relief washing over his features.
"You'll have it. We leave at first light."
As he turned to leave, I glanced around my cabin one last time. The peaceful solitude I had found here would soon be a distant memory. I knelt down beside Huell, scratching behind his ears. "Looks like we're heading back into the fray, buddy," I murmured. Huell nuzzled my hand, his unwavering loyalty giving me the strength I needed. I stood up, determination coursing through me. The path ahead would be dangerous and uncertain, but I was ready. For my country, for the future, and for the chance to finally find peace within myself, I would face whatever came next. As the colonel stepped out into the cold Alaskan night, I followed, leaving behind the sanctuary of my cabin. The world needed me once more, and this time, I would not fail. I walked the colonel over to his vehicle, a matte black military-grade Humvee, its robust tires leaving large tracks in the snow. As he climbed inside, I noticed him glance back at my cabin one more time. It had been a haven for me, a place where I could finally find some semblance of peace. But duty called.
Thank you, Nathaniel.
His voice was gruff, but there was a real hint of gratitude there.
I know this isn't easy for you. It's not fair to you.
I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. When are things ever truly fair?
I'll make it up to you, I promise.
I didn't believe him, but I also knew there were bigger problems than my own comfort. Truth be told, I'm surprised it took the world that long to reach out. For years, I'd kept a bag prepped in case of a mission like this. Now, unpacked, I was really just beginning to leave it all behind. I still didn't feel like responding to his promise. I finally got a good look at the colonel. The years seemed equally unfair to him. I wondered how many times he had made that same promise, and how many of them he had managed to keep. I guess it didn't really matter. We were both just soldiers, doing our duty. How'd you get that? I pointed at the scar near his left eye. He definitely didn't have that back in the day.
This?
The colonel looked up toward the scar.
You should have seen the other guy. Ha ha ha.
He laughed, but it sounded forced.
Nah, this is actually from surgery. Had to replace the whole retina after an explosion left me blind. Funny, the burst didn't leave a scratch, but the doc did.
I frowned, not sure what to say. I never liked the idea of being under a blade, or leaving my fate up to someone else's hands for that matter. I guess you're lucky you got it fixed, was all I could put together. He nodded, little expression crossing his face.
Yeah, I guess I am. But it's not the same, you know.
I didn't know. I never really thought about it. All I knew was that I was glad I was out of that game alive and intact. I used to wake up wondering if every morning was going to be my last. Now, well, I still wondered, but it was more of a distant thought. One I could almost ignore. I guess that's what peace does for you.
All right, well.
The colonel cleared his throat.
Look, I want to give you at least a little bit of time to grab some of your things. There's no telling how long this is going to take.
I nodded, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and reluctance. My life had been here, in this cabin. I've never felt attached to places or things, but 10 years was a long time, and it was here that I had finally found a sense of belonging. Now, I was about to leave it all behind. Again. Thank you, I'll be back soon, I said, giving the colonel a nod. As I made my walk back towards my cabin, I heard Babineau shout,
Hey, soldier, make sure to pack some dog chow. He's gonna need it.
He said with a little smirk. I couldn't help but chuckle. Don't worry, I'd never forget, I called back, raising my hand in acknowledgement. I stood in the center of my cabin, the soft glow of the oil lamp casting flickering shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Huel lay by the fireplace, his head resting on his paws, watching me with those wise, knowing eyes. The colonel's words still echoed in my mind, the urgency of the mission pressing down on me like a weight. Probably 20 minutes. That's all I had to prepare. I pulled the duffel bag from under my bed, the sound of the zipper harsh in the quiet room. What do you pack when you might not come back? I wondered, my hands hovering over the sparse contents of my life. I had lived simply for so long, valuing function over form, necessity over sentiment. Yet here I was, feeling a sorry pang of attachment to this place I had finally allowed myself to call home. The worn leather jacket, a staple of my existence here, was the first thing I laid in the bag. It had weathered many storms, much like me, and would serve me well again. Next, I reached for a pair of sturdy boots, their tops scraped in all kinds of direction, but soles thick and reliable, designed for traversing harsh terrains. As I placed my boots in the bag, a single droplet of sweat fell from my nose, splashing onto the spent leather. It felt like a tangible manifestation of the turmoil inside me. Had I grown too soft for a mission like this? The The peace I'd found in these woods had softened the edges of my pain, but had it dulled my edge as a soldier? I looked around the cabin, the sparse furnishings suddenly feeling like luxuries. The leather chair by the fireplace, the small table with its oil lamp and few cherished books, the shelf with practical items, each piece a reminder of the life I had built here, a life of solitude and quiet reflection. My eyes fell on the photograph of my father, stern and proud in his U.S. soldier garb. His gaze seemed to pierce through the years, reminding me of the man I once was. Loving things, getting attached. It was a dangerous game. It was love that put things in harm's way, made them vulnerable. I shook my head, pushing the doubts aside. I couldn't afford to let them take root. I was a soldier, forged in the crucible of war. I had faced demons far worse than this. I pulled a few more items from the shelf, a first aid kit, a small multi-tool, a canteen. Each item, chosen for its utility, went into the bag with deliberate precision. Huel watched me silently. I scratched behind his ears, feeling his pulse. It was pumping nearly as fast as mine. But I would not fail. I could not afford to. I stood up, surveying the cabin one last time. That picture of my father, the small rug under my feet, the modest table by the fireplace. These things would stay, part of a life I would return to. I grabbed my last item, a compact but powerful handgun, tucking it into the bag. 20 minutes. My time was up. I zipped the duffel bag closed, the sound final and resolute. I was ready, or as ready as I could be. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and doubt, but I would face it head on. For my country, for the future, and for the chance to finally find peace within myself, I would confront whatever came next. I would prevail as I always had, because that's who I was. Nathaniel Everhart, soldier, survivor, and protector. With one last look at my cabin, I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder and prepared to step out into the cold Alaskan night. I paused, my eyes lingering on the few remaining items atop my shelf. I reached for the small, tarnished compass my father had given me years ago. I couldn't help it. Slipping it into my pocket, I felt its familiar weight, a silent promise to find my way back. And with that, I shut the door. Huel followed close behind, and together, we moved forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever awaited us. The Humvee roared to life, its engine a low growl against the pre-dawn silence. I sat in the passenger seat, the leather creaking beneath me as I adjusted my position. The colonel's hands gripped the wheel, his eyes focused on the dark, winding road ahead. Huel sat patiently in the back, his eyes scanning the passing landscape, ears alert for any sign of trouble. The weight of the duffel bag rested heavily on my lap, a persisting reminder of the mission ahead.
"We leave at first light,"
the colonel had said, and true to his word, we were on the move well before dawn. The sky was just beginning to lighten, a sliver of pale blue on the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow-covered terrain. The Humvee's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the rugged path we followed, a narrow trail that wound through the dense forest. The air inside the vehicle was thick with unspoken tension. I glanced over at the colonel, the lines of stress and worry etched deeply into his skin. He had always been a hard man, but there was something different in his eyes now, something I couldn't quite place. The interior of the Humvee was bland. The seats were worn, the fabric frayed from years of use. A thin layer of dust coated the dashboard. A map lay crumpled in the console between us, marked with red lines and circles, a silent reminder of the complex operation we were about to undertake. The colonel's meticulous nature was evident in the organized chaos. Every item had its place, every tool within arm's reach. I caught sight of a small, faded photograph tucked into the visor above the colonel's head. It was of a young woman, smiling brightly against a backdrop of rolling hills. His daughter, I guessed, noting the resemblance in the eyes. It was a subtle detail, but it spoke volumes about the man beside me. I shifted my gaze to the road ahead, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay in store. The rhythmic hum of the tires on the gravel did little to soothe my nerves. I'd spent years in solitude, finding a semblance of peace in the isolation of my cabin. But now, the familiar stirrings of duty and responsibility clawed at me, pulling me back into a world I had tried to leave behind. Huell's quiet presence in the back seat was a small comfort, a reminder of the life I had built and the bond we shared. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "are you going to tell me a little more about this mission? Or do I have to guess?" The colonel glanced at me, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth.
I thought you'd enjoy the suspense.
"Yeah, just like old times," I replied dryly. "And just like back then, I didn't have a clue what I was getting into." He chuckled, a sound that was more hiss than holler.
Ha ha. All right, so here's the situation.
The roar of the airplane's engines was a monotonous drone in my ears as I peered through the binoculars. It's strange, but it gave me a feeling of nostalgia to the days when me and my team would be dispatched to take out various Al-Qaeda strongholds. Back then, the mission was clear: eliminate the target and come home. Now, the stakes were higher and the enemy more complex. Below me, the eastern coast of New America stretched out, a rugged, untamed landscape that was once part of Brazilian Empire. But this was a different world now than it was back then. New America had always given our country issues since it developed nuclear bombs shortly after the end of WW2. We had underestimated their country, and now it was biting us in the ass. It's not surprised that they've agreed to give Blackwater free rein in this region. Their alliance was a thorn in our side for nearly 2 decades now. Through the binoculars, I could see the dense green expanse of Ilha de São Sebastião. The island had once been a pristine jungle, had been transformed into a fortress by Blackwater. The jungle had been cleared in places, replaced by towering concrete structures and barbed wire fences. Helipads and watchtowers dotted the landscape, and heavily armed guards patrolled the perimeter. I lowered the binoculars and put my hand to my ear. Attached to my ear was a comms link that would allow me to speak to my support team. On the other end was the colonel, mission commander, Alex Hayes, top U.S. tech specialist, Dr. Elena Ramirez, medical officer, and Marcus Boomer Brooks, weapons specialist. Each of them here to give me support if I needed it. But I was not alone. In the cargo hold of the aircraft, Huell, my trusty and loyal companion, was secured into his harness, ready for the jump. He was more than just a dog. He was a partner. He had been with me through thick and thin, and I trusted him with my life. My comms crackled to life, and the familiar voice of the colonel broke through the static.
Nathaniel, are you in position?
He asked, his tone all business. "Almost," I replied, my eyes narrowing as I surveyed the island below. "I can see the compound. It's heavily fortified."
Remember, our primary objective is to rescue President Gates. We can't afford any mistakes.
The colonel reminded me, his voice steady but urgent. "I've got it," I said, my jaw set with determination.
Hey, Nathaniel, you better be careful down there.
Alex chimed in.
Their network is crawling with activity, but I've managed to disable most of the security cameras. But they'll notice the breach soon enough.
"Thanks, Alex. Keep me posted," I replied.
Nathaniel, I made sure to pack a few extra medkits in your gear. If you get into trouble, don't hesitate to use them.
Elena added, her voice calm and reassuring.
I'll be here if you need any guidance on how to use them.
"I appreciate it, Elena. Hopefully I won't need them," I said with a slight smile.
Boomer here. I've rigged up some charges for you. Plant them on the western wall. That's their weakest point. Guards will be rotating in the next hour, so it should provide a perfect window for your entrance.
Marcus advised, his tone gruff but confident.
Also, I had a sneaking suspicion you weren't packed for the terrain you'll be encountering. There's a handful of tools stashed underneath your seat. I couldn't let you walk out there in your high heels.
"Got it, Boomer." "Thanks," I said, mentally noting his instructions.
One more thing, Nathaniel.
The colonel interjected.
We have intel that the leader of Blackwater is on the island. Her name is Xerxes Valerian, and she's incredibly powerful.
I scoffed slightly. A woman?
Watch your mouth, Nathaniel.
Elena snapped, her tone sharp.
Xerxes Valerian is no ordinary woman. She's an incredibly skilled fighter and has killed nearly 2,000 people in combat alone. Not to mention that she's responsible for toppling 7 different governments at this point. Underestimate her, and you're as good as dead.
Sounds like you're quite the fan of her, I joke.
Seriously, Nathaniel, she's one of the most dangerous people alive.
Alex added. Yeah? Well, so am I. Marcus laughed, his voice a low rumble over the comms.
Ha 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 ha! I like your energy, Nathaniel. Let's bring it home.
I looked at Huel and gave him a knowing nod. It was almost time. Huel approached me confidently. I couldn't help but smile. He had looked like a seasoned soldier as I helped him slip into his specially designed halo, high-altitude, low-opening jumpsuit. I adjusted my own gear, every movement methodical and deliberate, as the roar of the airplane's engines reverberated through the cargo hold. The massive cargo doors of the plane slowly opened, revealing a vast expanse of starlit sky and the distant dark ocean far below us. The air was frigid at this altitude, biting through our suits, but I felt only the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This jump, from 40,000 feet, was a feat that had never been attempted before. It was a necessity, though. Blackwater's high-tech aircraft detection systems would detect any aircraft at lower altitudes. I knelt beside Huel, giving him a final check. You ready for this, boy? I asked, my voice steady despite the anticipation thrumming through me. Huel responded with a steady gaze, his eyes reflecting a deep trust and unspoken understanding. Rising to my feet, muscles tensed and ready, I stepped to the edge of the ramp, Huel at my side. Without hesitation, we leaped into the void. The wind whipped around us, a fierce and unrelenting force, as we plummeted towards the earth. The altimeter on my wrist began its countdown, the numbers ticking away. This was the highest halo jump in history, a perilous plunge from the edge of the stratosphere. At this altitude, the air was thin, and breathing required the supplemental oxygen masks we both wore. I focused on maintaining my body position, minimizing drag, and controlling our descent. Minutes felt like hours as we fell, the ground rushing up to meet us with increasing speed. My mind was a symphony of calculations as every detail of the mission played out in my head. I look over at Huel and see the excitement in his body language. His tail is wagging furiously behind him, and his eyes are locked on the target. This is what he lives for. This is why I brought him along. The altimeter beeps, indicating that we've reached the optimal jump altitude. At this precise moment, I deployed our chutes. The sudden jolt slowed our descent, the canopies billowing out above us like ghostly wings. We were still high above the island, but now our approach was silent and controlled, a pair of shadows gliding through the night. As we descended, the details of the island began to take shape. The dense green expanse of Isla de San Sebastião, now a fortress of concrete and steel, loomed beneath us. Watchtowers, helipads, and heavily armed guards patrolling the perimeter came into view. As we neared the ground, I prepared for the final maneuver. With practiced precision, we landed silently in a clearing just outside the compound's perimeter. I quickly detached my chute, securing it in the underbrush, while Huel shed his gear with a few practice shakes. We were on the ground on the edge of the island, undetected, and ready to execute the mission. Operation Chrono Phantom is a go, I said into the comms link. First things first, navigate the jungle till we reach the west side of the compound. The compound's surrounding terrain was treacherous. I stopped a few times along the way to hack through dense foliage. The thick canopies overhead cast a greenish hue over the jungle floor, filtering the morning light. The soil below was cool to the touch, though patches of sunlight amidst the foliage occasionally revealed just how hot the sun was really burning. I moved silently, my footsteps muffled by the damp, leaf-littered ground. The air was heavy with humidity, making each breath feel like inhaling through a wet cloth. Every step was deliberate, every decision calculated. I paused beside a large fern, patting on the soil beside me to cue Huel to sit. The fronds were as wide as my outstretched arms. He listened. The jungle was alive with sounds, bird calls, insect chirps, and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. It was a symphony of life that contrasted sharply with the serene, silent snowscapes of Alaska. There, my cabin had been a sanctuary of peace. Here, every shadow could hide a threat. An enemy's approaching step would camouflage beneath the noise. Acclimating to all these colors and sounds was going to take some time. Reaching into my bag's outer pocket, I pulled out my father's compass. The brass casing was worn smooth from years of use, the lid flipping open with a satisfying click. The needle swung lazily, yet always settled on true north. I didn't need it for direction. I knew exactly where I was. It was for motivation, a reminder of my father's composure in similar situations. I turned the compass over, my fingers tracing the engraved family seal on the back. The seal depicted a simple, arched scythe crossed against several sheaf of wheat, representing hard work and harvest. Below it was the family motto, Fortis et Fidelis, strong and faithful. It was a symbol of our heritage, of the values my father's father had instilled in him, the values he tried to give me before he was gone. Alex's voice crackled over the comms, cutting through the jungle sounds.
Everhart, you lost? The tracker shows you've stopped moving.
I glanced at the compass again, drawing strength from it. Negative, Alex, I replied, my voice calm. Just taking a moment. I'll be back on the move in a few seconds. There was a pause.
Roger that. Just checking in, you're making great progress.
I slipped the compass back into my pocket, smirking. The mission was clear. Secure the asset, and only after, neutralize the enemy. I had mapped out all the potential routes in my mind. Each was fraught with its own dangers and challenges. To the north, there was a narrow path cutting through the dense jungle, leading directly to the compound's outer fence. It was the shortest route, but also the most exposed. The enemy patrols were likely heavier there, with watchtowers directly above, offering high visibility. A swift approach, but high risk of detection. To the east, a river wound its way through the terrain, offering a quieter, more concealed approach. We could use the natural cover, moving silently through the water, but it would be slow. The water was infested with leeches and other hazards, and there was always the danger of running into a submerged trap. It was a stealthier option, but time-consuming and physically taxing. The west side presented another option, a rocky incline that led directly up to compound's western wall. Boomer figured it was the optimal route and prepped me with explosives in case. The downside was the climb. It would be arduous, and if I slipped, there would be no coming back. It was a route that required precision and endurance, but offered a tactical advantage of surprise. Huel stayed close, sensing my tension. His presence was more than just comforting. It was essential. His focus and acute sense of smell would be the key to locating the president within the compound. The kidnappers might have moved him, hidden him deep within the maze of buildings and underground bunkers. But Huel's nose could pick up scents no human could, tracking the president's unique scent trail through the chaos. I activated my comm, the slight crackle of the connection a comforting familiarity. Alex, what's the status on the guards? When's the next rotation?
Hold on, checking now.
Alex's voice came through, steady and reliable. While waiting for his response, I scanned the jungle again, every rustle and shadow playing on my nerves.
Got it.
Alex said, breaking the silence.
Guards rotate positions towards the end of their shifts. Next shift ends in 19 minutes. It's a slim window, but you won't get another for an hour. They're a bit erratic, though, not sticking to a strict pattern. Seems like this morning's technical difficulties are making them jittery. Guards are all over the north side. I strongly advise against that route.
I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Understood. I'll need more on their frequency. Give me countdown till our window. For a split second, my mind flashed back to the cabin. The simplicity of chopping wood, the quiet evenings by the fire, and the peaceful solitude. It was a world away from this jungle, but in both places, Survival hinged on a knowledge and respect for one's surroundings. The tools might differ, but the principles remain the same. Respect the land, move with purpose, and never let your guard down.
Roger, I'll stay alert. So what's the plan, big man?
Alex's audio chimed in and caught me off guard. I shook it off the memories and focused on the present. The mission demanded my full attention. I scanned the area one more time, ensuring it was clear. I was still some ways away from the compound, and I'd have to make progress if I was going to make it to any of the points on time. I moved on, following a nearby stream for a while. The sound of water masked my movements, providing a natural cover. North is a no-go, I began. We're prepped for west, but the climb is brutal. One slip and it's game over. I'd prefer going east. It's quick. Any chance I catch something nasty from that water? Elena chimed in.
The water's fine, it's the wildlife you have to watch out for. Surrounding hospitals are packed with sick patients being treated for leech sores and piranha bites. I'm also going to need you to be extra cautious about snake bites out there.
Snakes? I've dealt with them before, I replied, pushing aside a thick vine.
These aren't just any snakes.
She continued, her tone serious.
These waters are an area known for its high concentration of venomous species. Bites can cause rapid tissue necrosis, severe hemorrhaging, and even neurotoxicity.
Sounds like East is out too.
The colonel chimed in on my behalf. Yes, sir, I said, nodding again. East was out. Boomer's mic chimed in.
Don't worry, kid. Boomer's already given you everything you'll need. Those explosives are going to make that wall look like paper mache. By this time tomorrow, you'll be a war hero. You'll owe me dinner and drinks when this is all over.
Even in these conditions, I couldn't help but chuckle. Ha ha! We'll see about this. One misstep on that climb and you'll be having dinner with a corpse.
In all my years, I never thought necrophilia would be a viable option. But after hearing this, I think it would be my only choice. I guess you'd better get back to us.
I grinned, taking a deep breath. I'm on it.